World Ready engineering team. And today we are going to present how we are building a globalization platform at PayPal to build World Ready products. So we'll start with our vision. So PayPal believes access to affordable and convenient financial services should be a right for all rather than a privilege for the few. As we democratize financial services for consumers, we can enable the hopes, dreams, and ambitions of millions of people around the world. Now, I don't know about you guys. For me, that just feels like we are in need of really good globalization platform. And that's what we have been trying to do for past couple of years. We try to, reinvent the wheel for globalization at PayPal. We try to figure out our pain points and how we can address them in one common solution. And some of the pain points we saw were that it's difficult to integrate the internationalization solution that we had if an application is already in place, or let's say when we buy some other services, or when subsidiaries join in, it's difficult for them to come on board with what PayPal has in terms of internationalization and globalization solution. So that was one of the pain points. Another, rolling out updates can be very expensive when it also rolls out applications releases, because that's where it gets very expensive. And that's why many times the updates to internationalizations, to content, are kind of held back. And then, the application teams are not ready to do those changes or to roll out new releases. And so in relation to these pain points that we looked at, we actually came up with a platform which is called the World Ready platform. And in this presentation today, we will go into details of how this platform is structured, what are the elements of it, and how we are trying to address some of the pain points that we just discussed. So with this, the agenda is introduction to this platform and what constitutes this platform, which is the content as a service, market data as a service, and internationalization as a service. With this, I'll hand it over to Shibi to take us into the World Ready world.
Thank you, Neha. Can you hear me? Okay. So extending from what Neha said, now before we jump into World Ready, the PayPal has been around for a while. We started in 1998. We have 400 plus million active customers. We operate in 200 plus markets. We offer services in 40 plus different languages. So everything we do PayPal, we have to do at scale. So what happens is that over these years, we build so many capabilities, customer experiences. And also when we buy new companies, new kind of experiences comes in as well. So the question we ask our developer community is, do you have all the information that is needed for you to launch in all the 200 plus market that we operate? At times, the answer is yes, maybe, no. So we would like to standardize that. So we build it, we come up with something called as a World Ready team. So when you say World Ready, the term signifies that it's a combination of people, process, framework, technology know-how, all of that combined together. We have the know-how to build a globalization framework, internationalization, localization, set of front-end SDKs, set of services. All of these services are extended to all the applications at PayPal, as well as the new ones that we are buying as part of we purchasing new companies as well. So that in collection of that is World Ready. Talking about the platform, Neha mentioned about the platform we are building in. So this is the set of services that we offer to other teams. We take care of content. when you want to take an application to a particular market, content is definitely one part of the equation. We have to translate this content to a particular language. We have to adapt to a particular market. When you say adapt, it's more like at times our product may be named differently in a different market. We have to represent in that particular name. Sometimes some of the keywords may be represented in different names. That's the adaptation part of things, and then we translate this as well. So the content at PayPal was in fact merged with the code earlier. Now we externalize that content into a different GitHub project altogether. We manage this ourselves. We manage the lifecycle of the content ourselves. And then the other part of that is this World Ready SDK. It's set of libraries. We have the library in almost all the technology stack that we provide. Node.js, Java, as well as mobile stack. The World Ready SDK will manage the connectivity to World Ready service. It provides content as a service. It provides market data as a service. When you say market data, it's essentially CLDR to its core, but it is more than CLDR. We have our own additional data that is coming part of the market data. Now the down layer over there is this World Ready service, which is powering all of that. We expose this service. PayPal is a big adopter of GraphQL. The content, market data, all of that is provided as GraphQL services. The reason we choose GraphQL is because it's up to the user. Like, we don't need to, just like in Rust, we have Rust-based protocol where we are throwing in the complete body to the client. Instead of that, the customer the caller can detect, I'm looking for these many fields only, then they'll getting only those kind of fields. So altogether is World Ready platform. What you're seeing over here is a very, very high-level architecture of how everything fits in. It's more of a conceptual representation, not really physical. But then I'll take you through take through each one of them. The vertical lines indicate different layers. So in the leftmost layer, you can see our customers contacting PayPal through our websites or mobile, as well as we expose APIs that our partners call. They come into the next layer. On the top over there, you can see Java stack, you see Node.js stack. We have World Ready SDK provided for each of these stacks. These are smart clients. It has the ability to fetch content for you, ability to fetch market data for you. It will fetch this information periodically. It caches this information. It compresses this information. So it is as if this data is locally available for your application. And even though I represent Node.js and Java stack over there in one layer, it is essentially and physically there are in multiple different layers. Node.js layer is what we expose to outside, which is running in DMZ. Other one is more in the more highly secured zone Java layer. Then there are APIs available as well. All of them communicate to a very thin layer over there, the vertical one called World Ready Service. Think it as a API gateway. It orchestrates the call to different kinds of services. On the top layer, you see market data. So this is what we are talking about. The market data is the CLDR. We based on CLDR, but then we have much more towards that. Neha will be talking us more about what are the different kinds of market data that we fetch. And then we are based on standards. In the rightmost layer, you can see that ISO/CLDR and the other different standards. We periodically fetch in this information. We have something called a data ingestion pipeline. We pull in this information periodically. We have a governance process set in which we work closely with the legal, we work closely with risk to ensure that this aligns with what PayPal can publish. It's not that everything we take from outside immediately we can make it available. We have to ensure that it is in alignment with the legal. This is highly curated data, standardized data available across all the applications within PayPal. So that particular market data is available, and it is exposed as an API to the World Ready service. Now it is uniformly available to all the applications within PayPal, irrespective of the stack. The next layer over there is content as a service. Think it as a headless CMS, similar to what Contentful is providing. All the content available and content for all the applications with this PayPal is sent via this content as a service API. I draw your attention to the right bottom over there. What happens in PayPal is that when we start a new application, new project, new initiative, we do this in-a-box setup where the content designer, application developer, legal, UX, all of them comes together. They build what we want to build, right? So then they go in separate ways. UX and content designers, they use tools like Figma, Sketch to build what they want. And then the right bottom, you can see is Figma. We build plugins for both of these tools, Figma/Sketch, in which directly from Figma, you can export this content directly to GitHub. For us, GitHub is the source of truth when it comes to content. So from Figma, then we have other kind of tools like localizability scanner built in. So before that, once you generate the content in English, we need to get it adapted, we need to get it translated. So this is continuous translation of content happens and we have language experts across the world who will be able to translate this content to the 40 different languages that we operate. So that happens on a continuous basis. We do adaptation, we do translation. We use AI over here to optimize on this, but at the same time, whatever translated by AI is validated by our language experts. The translated content comes back in a week's time, mostly. And then we have localizability scanner, which is our own tool to ensure that whatever comes through is within the guardrails of what we want to showcase to our end users. So once after that, there is a content sync process. Now we externalize the content from the application. We manage the deployment of the content to live. That is independent. So application doesn't need to push. Anytime there's a change in the content can be pushed directly to the server. So there is the middle layer over here. We have a process in which we create something called as a content-only manifest. Now you think it as a Docker image. You create this particular image, put it into a NetApp-based cloud storage, which is mounted as a Docker volume to our content server. We, in fact, support multiple modes like this. This is one of the way. We also depend on Google Cloud Storage to push this content as well. Depending on the market we operate, depending on the technology that is available in that particular market, we support both the modes. Irrespective of the market, we have the ability to push content dynamically at runtime. And then as soon as the content is pushed, the content is available as part of the service, and it is available to the application. So the important thing over here is that when you are doing this at PayPal scale, it's very difficult for us to make this application developer make the code changes for us. But so what we did is that this is already baked into the platform. All they need to do is to upgrade to the latest World Ready SDK. Our SDK does everything. It does the job of fetching the new content directly from the application, directly from the backend. Below that, there is some downstream services, value-added services. This is not just the market data and the content alone. There are other applications within PayPal which make sense to be part of market data. Some of them could be pricing. Some of them could be like what are the products that we are available in a particular market. For example, if I'm launching a new product in, say, Italy or in India, if my application is dependent on another service within PayPal, is that service available in that particular market? Like say PayPal Credit. Is PayPal Credit available in India, for instance? If it is not there, then there's no point me working on launching this in this particular market. So that kind of insight we provide upfront by means of these downstream services. So the World Ready service layer over here, I said it as an API gateway. At times it serves the data on its own. Sometimes it accesses a pass-through to these downstream services. On top of that, in the bottom layer, we have data alerts. So anytime CLDR data gets changed, or else any of the downstream services has an update, like say pricing changes at PayPal for a particular market, we have to notify people that this has changed. CLDR our customer service number gets changed. We need to notify our other people that they need to know that something has changed. So we build in data alerts. It scans through this data periodically to ensure that is there any mutation to this kind of records, we notify them. So all of them combine together into a single service called World Ready service. Last but not least, we also support mobile. When you talk about mobile, PayPal's application constitute like 40% of it is content. Then we also serve I18N data. As you know, I18N data is big. So we slice this data by means of locale. And then when you go to a particular market, we are in India, accessing from India or a different country, Germany, it will connect to World Ready Service. World Ready Service will, and then say that I'm in this particular locale. Point me to the binary or to the files where you can download IATN data specific to this particular locale, and we will provide a reference to CDN. It could be Fastly, it could be Akamai, where in which we can download this IATN data, download this content, and then we are able to reduce the size of our application by 1/10 by doing that. So these kind of services all combine, encompass together in a single platform, World Ready Service, so that we provide unified experience to all the applications within PayPal. Move on. We'll talk a little bit more about content. So at PayPal, there are many applications in different technologies. We are doing this. This is in progress right now. We are in the process of decoupling content. Right, so because this is not just a technology problem, this is a people problem, process problem. It takes a long time for us to make this shift. So first thing is that right now the content is, or else content is added as a properties file, packaged along with this particular application. But when you think about content, the content has its own life cycle, just like code, just like SDLC life cycle that we follow. Content also has its own life cycle. So we have to take our content designers seriously. They go author content, and then they have to wait for the application team to push this code. At times they lose context, so it's very difficult for them to manage the life cycle of the content. So we are running this process in which we are decoupling the content. It's a 4-step process for them. We separate code and content. We do independent deployment of the content, and we provide the content as a service. And then there is personalization aspect of the content. So what we are doing is that we're taking a particular source code, we are splitting them into multiple different repositories. One application developer will focus only on what they do best, is to focus on the business application. The content designer will take care of the lifecycle of the content, including authoring, getting legal approval, getting translated, adapted, pushing to live. Everything is managed independently. It is completely managed. We also manage the localization. There is ML-based translation happens. Our localization engineers manages this. We have language experts across the world to manage the localization. That is continuous localization happens. We're also contributing to, we build a Figma plugin in which we could extract the content out, directly push to GitHub. We are in the process of open sourcing that. So probably next few months we'll hear more from us on regarding this. When it comes to content decoupling, we are looking for a capability in which we can deploy the content within minutes. It has to, anybody could deploy, or we have content ops team that could deploy. It has to push to all the data centers. It works with the PayPal's release cycle. If we say TB stop means that this is critical time, don't push anything to production. That's what we call it as TB stop. We should honor that. Has to be cloud ready. PayPal is big adopter of Google Cloud, and then it also helps us expand our operations across the world. Now, this particular thing has to be cloud ready, follow all the quality checks. So as I described earlier, we follow 2 kinds of process depending on the market. We use Google Cloud Storage. We use content-only manifest deployment using NetApp. When it comes to content as a service, we expose it as a headless CMS. We have smart clients both at Node.js and Java layer. We also enable experimentation. Depending on who the user is, we can provide some different set of contents. We can do A/B testing based on that. We have the ability to cache the content for better performance. This is 5 nines of availability or content application. At the same time, it needs to, the latency also has to be within milliseconds. And the content is compressed. We have, at the client side, we have in fact, improved the compression, I believe 75% or something, right? So, and we also support pass-by reference. This is typical cases when S3 or GCS kind of technology is used to pass the content. We can provide a reference to that particular content from one to another rather than sending these bytes over the network. So those are supported as well. There is a topic of personalization of a content. This is more, this is different from the normal personalization. It's more of normal personalization would be like based on who we are, what kind of offers we can push for you. In this particular case, this is how how do we speak, based on what we know about who you are, how do we speak to you? Like based on your gender, based on your generation, should we address you formally, informally? That is what we mean by personalization of a content here. How to say something to our end user so that it reflects PayPal's personality. We believe that every interaction with the PayPal should reflect our personality. It is identified as enthusiastic, empathetic, confident. So every interaction we need to reflect that personality. It should reflect in our website. It should reflect in the emails that we send. It should reflect on the SMS we send. So we're looking at the various use cases at PayPal. We cover pretty much all the various cases. 99% of the web applications is already addressed, onboarded with the World Ready platform. We also support cases like Gatsby. In case the web app plus CDN use cases, our World Ready SDK has the ability to fetch content from there. We also support server-side content, Java-side layer. All you need to do is to upgrade your Maven version, and the latest content is available for you. When I say content, just content as well as the market data as well. As well as the mobile use cases where we are able to slice the content by means of a particular locale, and only that particular locale-related content is fetched for you. So with that, I will move on to market data. Invite Neha to.
Thanks, Shibi. So we'll move on to market data. Before that, I just wanted to, reiterate briefly what Shibi said, that the focus here is to separate the business logic of applications from the World Ready or the globalization logic. So while with this, we are truly able to separate those out and take control of the content, take control of the internationalization and globalization services that applications need. And by taking control, we are responsible for the quality. And also by taking control completely of the life cycle, we are able to handle that quality rather well. We are not dependent on the applications to do that. It also reduces, the friction that we get from application teams, and reasonably so. We cannot expect all application teams to know about all the nitty-gritties and all the details and complexities that come with globalizing or making a product world ready. So next element that we identified for making any application world ready is market data. And Shibi briefly mentioned what is market data. So this is a very vague definition for us, but anything that's regionally changing, that's regional dependent, and that application will need to know in order to launch in that region is market data for us. So we are not saying that it has to be by locale, it has to be by country, because regions can be different than countries as well. So this is a very vague and large definition for market data, but because it's vague, it lets us, take as many use cases and data points in market data services that we offer. So some of the examples are here, the data in time, market data, all the internationalization, CLDR, metadata, our own overrides on top of that metadata. Then we have territory containment data. We have a name profanity filter, which is a really interesting use case that we'll cover a little later in here. But profanity filtering can also be regional, because certain F words that we consider very offensive in the United States are actually legal names somewhere in Europe. So it is regionally dependent. And then there is shipping, whether shipping is supported in this country or not by PayPal. That's a regional dependent data. Customer support phone numbers. So, and this is another example. Since we took control of the content, we have seen there are so many places where content, the customer support numbers were hard-coded in the content. So now by externalizing that and actually providing a service to get the right content, the customer support phone numbers, it's actually pretty scalable. after this, right? So if we launch in the new market, once we understand that, this customer support phone number service needs to be updated for this new market, the application just gets it, right? There is no need to update application, or even application developers no need to bother themselves with this information. So these are all, market data use cases that we have. And I think, Shibi, you talked about the ingestion. So because of the ingestion pipeline, there might be market data that other application teams have, gathered over the time. So we don't want to just reinvent all of that and try and find all of that information again. So the ingestion pipeline also gives some control back to these applications to actually push that information into our system and to make it available for everyone else. So once they actually push this, it goes through the governance system that Shibi mentioned, and it is available for all the PayPal applications to use, really. So this kind of democratizes the the regional or market-specific information that in the past the applications were kind of owning that, and every application, if there's a new application coming up, they will have to again go back, do the research, and find information which might be different than what the other application did. I'll also touch a little bit on the content. Because we externalized content from applications, we are now able to actually get common content like headers and footers, the kind of information you want to be associated with PayPal brand, right? And you want that to be uniform in different applications. So we are now able to take out in a common repository or common content. And the way the SDKs, the smart SDKs, are developed is they have different data providers for different kind of data that comes from the service, and the schema is defined for that. So, and you can have more than one content provider for the SDK. So for one application, you can have multiple content data points. So you can actually get content from many different applications or from the common repositories as well. So we also have, in a way, democratized the content. And, that also reduces the, again, the effort that comes from the content designers or from the localization, and also the memory optimization that comes along with it. Because all of that is now aggregated into one single repository for all the applications to use. I'll go into the profanity filter. So, our SDKs have very basic profanity filtering, because when someone onboards, they can also get a PayPal debit card with that name that they onboarded with. And you cannot have a profanity put on your debit card, and that's just one of the examples, right? And in general, you don't want bad data, anonymous names entering your system. What profanity filtering service does, it takes it to the next level. It's actually edit distance based, algorithm, which is not language dependent, but it can actually, with good confidence, figure out whether a certain name is offensive for that region. Because, as I mentioned, different regions can have different profanities and different offensive terminologies. So based on your region and based on what names or content that you have entered, it actually can give you a confidence level of whether that's actually a valid non-offensive term. So since this is now separated out from application again, and as we know, the culture changes. Certain terms that were completely offensive a few years ago are now mainstream. So we want to also move along with that, be culturally appropriate as well. So having removed that into a service gives us that flexibility to add and remove some certain filters and, have that. And if we plug that in with personalization as well, depending on the demographic of the user base, we can have different, tunings of these filterings and give you different experience that's more inclusive and that represents you as well. So that's about the market data. There are a lot more that I'm not allowed to say in here. Probably next year we'll be allowed to say more on that. This also, we also have a use case for transliteration that came when there were a lot of issues coming from China onboarding, because we were using the ICU 4J somewhere in the back end. So whenever a Chinese user onboards with a Chinese name, they need to have their pinyin, the Latin representation of their name, in order to do international transactions. So that pinyin transliteration used to happen somewhere in the downstream, and user did not have control over that. And since Chinese is polyphonic, some of the names can have multiple Latin representations, and those unfortunate users that do not have the most commonly used pinyin for that name will be rejected somewhere down the line when they try to do that transaction, and they have no idea why that happened. And this was not a good look for PayPal, and this was very inconvenient for any users of PayPal. So what we did is we implemented our own transliteration service, and actually I'll go into that into the use case, but that gives the user a chance to update their pinyin. If that's not the right pinyin that we have chosen for him, he can actually get it from the drop-down that we have selected. So it's not open text, it's not open for abuse in that way, but it also gives users some control over their identity that comes in PayPal. And now, this being a service, we can now also open it to other polyphonic languages. We can have certain Japanese scripts also, or languages transliterated in there. Cyrillic or any other requirement that comes in can go in this service, and it's immediately available for all the applications to use at that point. So with that, I'll move on to the internationalization as a service. This is, if any of you attended CLDR as a service yesterday, it's really that, but it's more PayPal specific. So under the hood, we use CLDR metadata for our internationalization. We also have a lot of overrides for PayPal specific, use cases for compliance reasons and whatnot. So what we have done now is, moved all this metadata and the overrides and our logic on top of it into a service underneath the World Ready service layer, and it's exposed as GraphQL. Now, all the SDKs that we already have for Java, Node.js, browser side, they know how to interact, they know how to get this information. But outside of that, let's say Honey or Zoom or other subsidiaries of PayPal now join in, they need to have that overrides that we have, and they need to have all the other information or the other logic that we have on top of this in order to work uniformly with and be compliant, same way all the other PayPal applications are. So even though they don't have this SDK, they come with other technology stack that we don't have SDKs for yet, they can directly get this information, this metadata, and the logic from our internationalization service as a GraphQL API and move on. So it's really easy to integrate with. It's easy to build on top of this. We are very particular in maintaining the documentation for it, reference applications for it. So it's easy to to go through that and get the examples, get the samples, and get it running for you. So this and the SDK that we do have are smart, as Shibi mentioned. We use globalized.js underneath, and then we have our own logic on top of that. Have our own validations and stuff. That also caches. There are two modes of operation depending on the applications. Certain applications have very strict requirements on the size, especially on the browser side. So they will not come with all the metadata bootstrapped, but rather, the SDK is then smart enough to understand, hey, for this locale, for this language, I need to get this part of information, or this particular application does not use name metadata or address metadata at all, so I don't need to cache that, or I don't need to get it bootstrapped with this application. So it will only get what you require for your application, and it's highly configurable. If it's not configured, it actually, based on the request that's coming, it will at runtime try to get this information for you, and cache that for a certain amount of time. For content, since we want to also support hot patches for content without application being affected by the release cycle of the content, the SDKs are able to fetch periodically. So it will refresh its cache periodically. And that's configurable, of course. So let's say every 12 hours, it will fetch all of the content for your application again and replenish its cache. So if there were updates that happen, backward compatible updates that happen during that time, the application directly gets it. Your emails, reflect all that content that's changed, and so on and so forth. So that's internationalization as a service. This allows us to roll out updates, CLDR updates in the background. This allows us to also gather, invaluable information about usage, about language usage, and patterns of, the users, from what regions they come, what kind of languages, what kind of applications or features they're using. All of that information is available here for us, to process further and make some fine-tunings and decisions based on that. So that's another byproduct that's actually really valuable that comes from this. So with that, I'll move on to the success stories. So I talked about the name profanity filtering. So once that has been introduced, the amount of fake names that we were welcoming before has been dropped to about 96%, and so this is combination of the SDK validations and the validation or the profanity filtering services that we have added. And as we fine-tune, since we have the information now, and since we have the amount and type of names we are filtering out, we can fine-tune, and we continue to fine-tune our profanity and name validation service in the background, and this keeps dropping. So that's a big success, especially for a fintech company, to not allow anonymous names and fraud, fraudulent activities that can come from that. I did not actually touch base on the input layouts, but the name layouts, right? Like in Spanish-speaking countries, you can have multiple last names, whereas in Indonesia you just can have one name, or certain parts of India you can just have one name, which is your valid identity. So having, taking that name layout information outside allows us to roll out these updates. So now in Mexico we had a problem where they were not able to put their mother's last name, which is part of their name identity, and that was creating a lot of friction on onboarding, because a lot of users were actually turned down. A lot of valid users were turned down. So just adding that layout, right? In Mexico, you can have up to four last names, for example, as optional, allowed Mexican users to enter into the system without that friction. And I don't have the numbers up here, but that small update that we did on the input layout service actually increased the onboarding success by around 23% in the first 6 months. So that's a huge success, in terms of our vision, which is getting these services to all the users, all the global users of the world. Then content service, so far we have about 15% of our applications are moved onto the content decoupling path, the content service, and we are adding as many, almost every day we are adding more. Pricing application, are we allowed to talk on that? I think we're not allowed to talk more, but it's a success, believe me on that. So that's about the success. This is the Pinion name that I mentioned before. So this is our new, onboarding flow into China. So now if you see, this person is able to choose from different Pinions. And now we are actually looking into extending this transliteration service for other languages as well in other parts of the world. Then, do you want to talk about the advantages, Shibi?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So with this World Ready platform, what you are having is that one unified platform across different stack, across different sub-adjacencies. You get latest metadata, latest content. They don't need to do any coding at all. All they need to do is to add this particular library, and then you are done. So it is very important that because having someone change because they have their own to-do items or their own priorities, every application. So if you're asking them to make at least a little bit of code change, it will take a long time. So all we ask them to do is to just make this one upgrade, and then everything is available for you. That's why you are able to be a bit more successful. Yeah. Anything else? You have more slides? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you. Any questions?
You mentioned that a lot of your content is in GitHub.
Yeah.
Have you come across any issues of authors that might not be very technical, not really understanding how to use Git or GitHub?
Yes. So last 2 years, we've been training our content designers to deal with GitHub and JSON. And so that was a learning path for them. Now they are comfortable because it takes time. So very valid. They in fact were scared of PR. They were scared of merge issues and all that. So that's the reason we are investing time in building this plugin, Figma plugin, in which this plugin, when you click on this plugin, it will say, if anything changed in GitHub, you pull that. Anything changing Figma, it does cross-checking between these two, and then you can choose between which one wins and then commit that. So we are trying to make it life simple for them, but definitely it's really tough. But we spend a year training them on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yes.
So you mentioned that the application development process is independent of the content process. So if there's dynamic content that needs to be included in this CSV,
Yes.
how does the application owner know any data that be?
Correct. So as part of the IANA box initial that I talk about, everybody comes together, decide what to build in. They decide on the key names. What is the key? The value, they will have a placeholder value, right? Welcome to PayPal, right? Now there's a welcome dollar name to PayPal. That dollar name is the dynamic string that only application team knows. So application team has the ability to do a PR to this content saying that now this particular name, substitute that with a dollar name, and they will substitute the value at runtime.
And also if you're talking about updates and automatically getting those updates, so it's semware. And the SDKs are aware of what versions are supported by this application, because there might be content changes where the application is not ready for that content, which is a major update. So for that, if there are major updates, then application will need to update their SDKs. And that will actually have a release process. But mostly for the hot patches and updates and translations that get in is what we try to target here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So you also mentioned you import CLDR data, but you have a lot of overrides on it. So do you ingest this data or put this data back into ICU to format stuff, or do you have your own custom libraries to do the format?
So we have our own libraries to do that formatting. Yeah. So we are trying to actually find some of the overrides that we can contribute back to CLDR. That would be probably ideal thing to do at this point. But some of those are really very PayPal specific, and for that we use our own libraries.
I would say we are fortunate to have Professor Mr. Mike McKenna with us. He's talking the next one. He's in the CLDR committee. His guidance definitely helps us. But then what we do right now is PayPal specific. There are, probably we should talk to Mike regarding how we can contribute back. But thank you. Yeah. Yes.
My question was similar. You said that you have additional data in addition, like on top of what CLDR provides. Like what made that necessary, and what is that data?
So sometimes the data, additional data means sometimes we have override because it needs to be approved by PayPal legal. Certain data probably we cannot take it as it is and put in, right? So that's why we modify this data. On top of that, additional data could be the other market-specific data, like what is the pricing, which is not specific to CLDR, which is specific to PayPal. So those are the additional data. Yes.
So PayPal supports like write-left languages?
We support
Yes, we do.
RTL.
How do you deal with the mixed text input? Do you guys have your own algorithm to take care of that, or depending on the browser based?
So that's a really big question. You're talking about BiDi, right? So for web applications, we do have some solutions for BiDi, but mainly we have a really good documentation as to how the applications should use the BiDi related best practices in their application, in their UIs. So we mainly depend on that, and there are some issues around that. There are also some issues around, mobile versus web. I think yesterday someone was mentioning about, uniformity in a platform versus your applications on different platforms. This is where it comes. So PayPal strives to have uniform experience over different platforms like web and mobile. And that's where we are actually trying to now come up with a solution again, because mobile works differently many times than web, the browser. So we are trying to come up with a standard solution so we can have that uniformity. I know that doesn't specifically answer your question, but it's a problem we are facing as well. Yeah. Are there any more questions? All right. So
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.